Like many blessings that we receive from the hand of God that he gives to us every day, I wonder if sometimes we take the miracles of Jesus for granted. Ho-hum, that's Jesus, he's God, he can do that. Big deal. So he changed water into wine, that's nice, but he should be able to. He's God. So he makes a blind person see, yeah, okay. So he drives out demons with his voice. Okay, he's God, he can do that. You know what would really impress me next time I have a cold if he came and said a word and it went away. What would really impress me if next time someone I love was diagnosed with a fatal disease, if he said a word or put his hand on him or her and took that away. What would really impress me is if there was a casket sitting here this morning and he came in here and I saw it with my own eyes, then maybe it'd be a little more than ho-hum, big deal. Those are just stories from long ago. I guarantee if you were one of the 10 men in Luke chapter 17 and you had leprosy, it would not be ho-hum, big deal. That's just God. He can do stuff like that. Hansen's disease, it's known as today. Leprosy. I'm by no means a doctor, but I did a little research on it this week, and it is truly one of the worst diseases imaginable. A bacteria that eats away at the cooler portions of your body. It starts with your extremities, your fingers and hands, your toes and feet, your nose, your ears, your lips, your tongue, your mouth. Gets into your upper respiratory system. Starts out by neutralizing your nerves, killing off your nerves in your extremities. I read a story about a missionary who worked at a leper colony in Hawaii, and he was making hot tea, and he accidentally spilled some of that boiling water onto his toes, and he jumped back immediately, expecting it to hurt, expecting a reaction, and there was none. And he did it again, intentionally, and there was none. And he knew what had happened. He had contracted leprosy. It goes on and cuts off your circulation. And oftentimes it will produce sores or tumors filled with fluid that clump together. If we had a TV up here, this is where I'd say to the kids, hide your eyes, or parents, watch what you let your children see as you put some photos up there. And oftentimes you consider you've lost feeling in your fingers and toes and feet, and you are losing circulation, where the circulation is eventually cut off altogether to those portions. You know what's going to happen. You begin to lose some of those digits, and you lose some function there or altogether. And you slowly, basically, are being eaten away by yourself from the outside in. And the thing is, unlike a cancer or something that they can say, well, make your plans. You have 3 months. You have 6 months. This can take years and years and years. It's this slowly debilitating disease. And you look around and you say, here's where it's going to end up, at least back in Luke 17. Nowadays, we have treatments. Nowadays, there are things people can do to at least slow the progress a little bit. You still have leper colonies, places like Africa and India and China. But even there, oftentimes the people are so disfigured that they choose to remain there because they don't want to go out back into society because they're so ashamed and embarrassed of what this disease has done to their physical appearance. But here, there was no treatment plan. There was nothing that could be done. This was going to be your fate. So put yourself in the shoes of one of these men. Let's even go back to before you knew about it. You have a good job. You have a family. You have a home. You have friends. And one day, you see a red spot about the size of a dime that appears on your skin. No, it's just a bug bite. Right? You don't think anything of it. Now it's 2 weeks later, and it's still there. And your wife, who has been kind of starting to avoid you a little bit, you should maybe go get that checked out. And the kids who have been staying away from you and not wanting their hugs good night at the end of the day, Dad, you need to go get that looked at. Mom, you need to get that checked out. And the neighbors are starting to talk, because now it's been 3 weeks, 4 weeks. So you go to the priest, says you're supposed to, and you say, it's probably nothing, but I need you to look at this and tell me if you're seeing something. And he asks you, well, how long have you had it? Does it itch? He asks you a bunch of other questions and say, okay, let's see it. And you pull back your cloak, and he jumps back, because he's seen this before. And immediately your life has changed. You don't get to go home and give your wife and kids a hug. Outside of the city gate, you go. Someone is sent home to go get your belongings, your clothes and things, and bring them out somewhere where you can go pick them up. But even there, now you have to stay at a distance, and they maybe take it and put it on sticks or take a clean blanket and wrap it in there, because they don't want to touch anything that you've ever worn. And they drop it there for you, and you see them at a distance, and certainly how are there not tears in your eyes and a heavy heart? How this must have weighed on anybody. And now your friends, it's people who are just like you. Leprosy is a great equalizer, right? It doesn't matter how educated you are, how rich you are, how great a job you had, how many friends you had, how big your family was. Now you're just another leper. And you have to cover your body, cover all your exposed skin, and you have to wear a veil over your face. And when anyone approaches you who doesn't have leprosy, because you can't go to them, you have to shout out, unclean, unclean. And the people you associate with, as you look at them in different stages of the disease, you know one day that's going to be you. And that's what you get to wake up to every morning. Talk about a terrible, terrible disease. Right? Something that we can't fathom, something that we can't imagine. This was the story of these 10 men here in Luke chapter 17. It's interesting, Jesus, when he tells them, go show yourselves to the priests. There is a section in Leviticus about infectious skin diseases, and then the next chapter talks about what to do when it has been healed, what thank offerings to bring to God when you've been healed from an infectious skin disease. But as far as I know, leprosy wasn't one of those that was healed ever, maybe very, very seldomly. And you wonder if when the priests were going through their rabbi school and got to that section, part of them kind of thought, well, yeah, when it comes to leprosy, we don't really even need to worry about this, because it's not going to happen where someone's going to come in who has leprosy and all of a sudden not have it one day. So this is almost irrelevant information as far as that's concerned when they're taking their exit exam. Leprosy doesn't have a cure. Leprosy doesn't just go away. But today it did. Jesus says to these 10 men, go show yourselves to the priests. And we're told there in Luke chapter 17, they went, and as they went, they were cleansed. And I picture that always as being more than just having, a little spot the size of a dime on your skin. A complete and whole and total cleansing. Maybe these guys had lost some fingers and toes, and they were restored. Maybe they had giant tumors all over their face and mouth and were disfigured beyond sight. And it was gone. And they felt themselves, and it was as if their skin was as clean as a baby's. And this one man, on the way, realized before he went he had to go back and say thanks. And he rushed to Jesus, and he threw himself at his feet. And it's interesting again how the Spirit tells us, and he was a Samaritan. He was a foreigner. He was a Gentile. He didn't know as much as all the other people of God in Israel knew. How do you put it? In the New Testament, in the Gospels, oftentimes Jesus, when he talks about people with great faith, it's the people you wouldn't expect to have great faith, right? It's the centurion whose servant is healed. I haven't seen such a great faith even in Israel. It's the Syrophoenician woman whose demon-possessed daughter is healed, and Jesus says, I haven't seen such great faith even in Israel. Even the dogs get some crumbs that fall from the tables, she says. What a faith, woman. It's this Samaritan leper. Your faith has made you well. Unworthy. Gentiles clinging to Jesus, the greatest of priests. Because you see, all the other priests here in the New Testament and the Old Testament, when he said, "Go show yourselves to the priests," well, they can diagnose the problem, right? They can look at you and say, "Here's what you have," and in this case, they can look at you and say, "Well, it looks like it's been cleansed." They can diagnose it. They can give a report on what's already happened, but they can't fix it. They can't change it for you. They can't give you something to make you better. The great high priest doesn't just diagnose the problem. He fixes the problem. The great high priest doesn't just say, well, here's the issue. Come back to me in a few weeks and we'll talk. He says, here's the issue. Here's the solution. Here's how I'm going to make you well. So let's put leprosy aside for a few minutes. The great high priest says to all of us this morning, here's the issue on Thanksgiving Day. Because leprosy is just a faint picture of a bigger disease that we inherit from our parents and we pass on to our children. A disease that doesn't start from the outside and works its way in. It starts from the inside and it works its way out by our hands and our feet and our mouths. Out of the heart come evil thoughts and murder and adultery and so on and so forth. The disease is sin. And sin is the great equalizer, isn't it? They make caskets for people this big and people this big. Because that's the wages that sin brings. And we try to cover it up. We try to wear a cloak over it. We try to hide it. We try to do it in secret or in the dark because we're ashamed of it and we don't want others to see. But even then, sometimes you can't help it and it gets exposed. And people think, and we think about ourselves, how could I have done that? How could I have said that? How could I have thought that? We're ashamed of it. So Jesus, in his mercy, came to this great leper colony called Earth, filled with people who are disfigured beyond belief, including you and me. Because he knew we couldn't come to him. We have to keep our distance from him. We said earlier, he's a consuming fire. He's a holy God. Nothing sinful can come to him and expect to be heard or seen. Unclean, unclean, unclean. He comes to us. And instead of the priest who would see a dime-sized lesion on your skin and get away from me. Out to the gates you go. Outside of the city. You can't be with me. I don't want to get what you have. Jesus, instead of driving us away, pulls us in. He embraces us. In fact, he contracts our disease intentionally. God made him who had no sin to be sin for us. And our isolation and our loneliness and our guilt and our death, he takes upon himself. And this Sunday we begin that journey again as we start the new year of the church. We talk about him coming into this world, walking through the region not just of Galilee and Samaria, but the region of this whole world for us. He became man. And it ends with his death and resurrection. And here's what he's done: to make you clean. And in his word, and in our baptism, and in his supper, he daily and constantly reminds us that we are clean. So go show yourself to the priest with a capital P. The priests of the law drive away. The priest of the gospel embraces. The priests of the law diagnose. The priest of the gospel cures. And when you show yourself to him and when you realize the cleansing that has happened, on this Thanksgiving Day we have so many things to be thankful for, certainly, but this trumps them all. We can say with Paul later in Philippians 4, which we read earlier, I've learned to be content whatever the circumstances. I know what it is to be in need. I know what it is to have plenty. I've learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. I can do all this through him who gives me strength. So whether you go home to a large family or just you, whether you go home to a large dinner or a TV dinner, whether you go home and smile or cry this Thanksgiving, show yourself to the priest. Enjoy his warm embrace and the eternal home that will be yours through him. May God bless your celebration of Thanksgiving. Amen.